Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza. And in this episode, I want to explore enterprise data and to get a view from the leading edge of what organizations are doing to adopt AI strategically and operationally. I invited Ben Johnson to address these issues after I heard him speak at an event held at the UK's House of Lords. Ben is the co-founder and chief technology officer at Uptitude. He has a degree in physics and has over 15 years of experience working with data across a wide range of sectors, including missile defense and pharmaceuticals. He specializes in digital transformation, low-code development, and integrating AI into enterprise systems, helping organizations, as he puts it, move faster, smarter, and with purpose. Ben has led data strategy development across supply chains, R&D, compliance, marketing, and works with teams to embed AI into core business functions. Alongside his work at Uptitude, Ben contributes to conversations on technology governance and advises UK Parliament on AI policy and the future of responsible innovation. He believes that organizations that harness AI ethically will drive the next wave of economic and societal progress. Ben, welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. If I could ask you to start by just giving us a brief introduction of yourself and Uptitude and what Uptitude does, please.
Sure. Hi, Ashley. My name is Ben Johnson. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Uptitude. I have a background in physics and quantum computing. I moved into enterprise to support more people with data and especially building in-house systems which integrate with all of their internal data sources as opposed to pushing everything outside. I work for Uptitude. I founded Uptitude. It's a data and AI consultancy working mostly with enterprise companies, specializing in risk and compliance monitoring. We focus on helping enterprise companies solve their data problems, build low-code solutions, and more recently, introducing them to AI. And that's where we're at the moment. I know that's how we met with my passion for solving data problems and introducing AI to enterprises, and also talking to Parliament about these issues and how we might want to consider changes to policy on that basis.
Great, Ben. Thank you so much for that introduction and a little bit about background about you. So let's begin the conversation. Look, you mentioned data already in your introduction, and data ultimately is the bedrock of AI. So what changes are you seeing in attitudes towards data when you're working with enterprises in the UK and internationally?
I think data is becoming even bigger. So with time, the amount of data we collect centrally continues to grow. But all of that data comes with, let's say, a burden. You have to make sure it's stored properly. You have to make sure it's disposed of properly. So you need to have all of these data basics in place with the enterprise data. Over time, I've seen that can be not the priority. And so over time, there's just lots and lots of data. It hasn't been curated properly. There's not proper ownership. And that does cause issues, but there's always something which is, a bigger priority than the data quality stuff. With AI coming along, I've seen good data quality and the data basics coming back to fashion. So good data hygiene is essential now, especially as I see there's more and more desire to have cross-functional communication with respect to data. So you might want to connect your sales systems to your HR systems, to your marketing systems. And to do that, you really need to have all of those different functions adopt good data hygiene, but also standardize to the same way of doing things. So there's lots of correct ways of doing data governance, but you need to have everything being done in a similar kind of way to allow AI to connect the dots. The worst case scenario is AI won't be able to connect the dots. But perhaps what's even worse than that is if it connects the wrong dots,
Yeah.
which is one of the big risks of AI. If it's trained on bad data, then the outputs will be bad. And if there is not a responsible human in the loop to check and validate all of those results, it could result in negative decisions being made of that data. So nobody wants that. And so now I'm seeing a shift back to having high quality data and putting more money and funding into, let's say, master data management, which is becoming, it's just critical now with AI. Interestingly, AI might have a part to play in that, but to a certain extent, you have to get the basics right before you can do the more exciting stuff.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ben. But if I could go back, this notion of getting the data basics right is something I fully agree with. But data is one of these very amorphous things. It's been around forever. Organizations know they need to deal with it effectively and manage it carefully. And yet, if I think back to some of the earlier implementations of, and now this is really going to go back a while, ERP systems, where enterprise-wide systems needed clean, integrated data and were being brought in order to integrate data. Why are we having a conversation, now about data quality when surely those systems and all of those initiatives previously were meant to clean just that data?
I think, and you might be talking about SAP in terms of finance. That absolutely needs to be completely aligned, because otherwise you've got issues with your financial reporting. There could be penalties, fines, lots of these negative external consequences of having bad data. So definitely with ERP systems, I've seen that come together by necessity, and I think that's where we're now going to see more data quality improvements in these other systems where maybe it's not necessary to have all of this data standardized across these different systems, because each different hub can operate on its own. So yes, for these finance systems, these big ERP systems, by necessity, they must have the data standardized in a good quality. The next stage is these isolated hubs of data, which are actually, I would argue, is much bigger than these ERP systems. To connect those disparate sources, it's now become necessary again to improve the data hygiene. And so I think that's where I'm seeing the drive now, is with AI, it becomes, let's say, a lot more beneficial to an enterprise company to connect these data sources, perhaps even essential and necessary if they want to implement AI cross-function.
And the point about implementing AI and managing data across functions, I fully agree with. I'm right there with you. I guess in my experience, thinking back, data has ended up in these silos. You've ended up with data stovepipes. And I just wonder, what do you think it would take for an enterprise to actually bring some of those silos together to really ensure that data is managed on a cross-functional basis?
So basic data hygiene. So the first thing is we need to understand what data is old and
Mhm.
what data is new, because without that, AI will just take perhaps data from 5 or 10 years ago, and it will assume that that is the current data. So the age of the data is very important. I've mentioned before the master data, and standardizing key fields across different data sources is extremely important. Could be as simple as country or brand or function name. Sometimes there could be different functions call themselves in different ways. And unless we standardize across these master data fields, AI will get confused and it won't be able to connect those different data sources. Other than that, I think having good ownership of the data is very important, because when these questions arise about the data, is it old? Is it new? Should it be archived, or can we change certain aspects of it? If there's not a strong owner, all those questions, they kind of fall on deaf ears,
Mhm.
or it gets pushed down to, say, a country level. So each country will have their own opinion. But that causes an issue because, as you can imagine, you have 50 different people. The chances they have the same opinion almost zero. So I think having good ownership, having good data hygiene, which is just not just the historical stuff, it crosses lots of different paths. That's just the start, and it has to be done before you implement AI. You can implement AI on top of that, on top of anything. But if you want to have good output, you need to have this good input at the beginning. And
Yeah.
it takes time as well. So I think the enterprises that are going to leverage AI fastest in the future are the ones that are today looking at these questions and addressing them.
So I'm going to show my hand a bit here because I think, and I really appreciate your views, particularly as you're working with and organizations, both nationally and internationally. Um, I've read many job ads, and I have yet to see a job ad that says, as part of someone's job description, managing data and making sure that the data that passes through their hands or through their function is absolutely critical and needs to be managed as part of their job. I mean, data management is bottom nobody. It's everyone and no one. I mean, what are your thoughts? Is that
It,
what you're seeing?
it's everybody's and nobody's job. I think it should be part of people's job descriptions. I think that would help them to properly prioritize that
Mhm.
on top of all of the hundreds of other tasks that everybody has as part of their day jobs. I think, we have to understand that people only have a certain number of hours in the day. And if they are not being given the correct priority and time to address these data topics, then they will get pushed under the rug and we'll end up with these situations we're in now. I would I would love to see it in more job descriptions. Another thing is when people leave a company. So this is an
Mhm.
interesting topic which is becoming more and more of an
Yeah.
issue. When people leave a company, where is their data transferred to? It's rare for, as part of the HR offboarding process, that data to be handed over to a new owner. Sometimes, I would argue most times, people themselves don't know what data is assigned to them, especially if they've been in an organization for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And so that's also quite interesting because as part of the process, there is nothing there officially that says all of your data must be transferred to a new appropriate owner. And until we have some of these things become formal in job descriptions, in yearly reviews, and in HR processes, they'll continue to be just not ignored, but unseen, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
It Writing things down, it gives them power and it gives them authority and it helps people understand that they're important.
Yeah, and I guess without that, and without managing good quality data and achieving good quality data, organizations can't really get the full benefits of AI. So I just wondered, Ben, from your perspective, and again, from the work that you're doing with organizations, what are some of the opportunities that are driving organizations to adopt AI?
I think at the moment the focus is still on efficiencies,
Hmm.
and what I mean by that is doing the same things faster. um, it's similar in a way. The good way to think about it is a factory. The output of the output of the factory is the same regardless of if a human did it manually or a robot did it. Just the robot can do it in 1% of the time and 1% of the cost. So I see the first focus of enterprise is these operational efficiencies. But the really interesting one is when we are moving into doing things which would be, let's say, impossible to do previously. A good one might be having a 10,000 files and having someone very quickly interrogate those files to come up with an answer. And there's also lots of advances, let's say in R&D. So we work with pharmaceuticals, and we can now do things which used to be impossible in the R&D process. For example, some aspects of gene sequencing and finding whether or not drugs will be effective or not. Doing that up front is a lot cheaper than doing it in the lab, and these types of things would just not be possible even if you had a human in the loop. So the first thing will be operational efficiencies, absolutely, because that's almost the low-hanging fruit, I would say, in terms of ability to understand it and just the number of functions it touches. That potentially touches every function, could increase their efficiency with AI. But the next really interesting one is when we start doing things that previously weren't possible or we didn't even conceive doing because of what we have now with AI.
And do you see boards kind of taking those opportunities at a more strategic level, or are they just coming to AI because really it's inevitable and they don't have any other choice?
I think, firstly, AI is inevitable. It 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 doesn't matter what policies we put in place, how much we try and slow it down. Somewhere AI will advance, and I think it's better if we almost get on the wave and keep up with AI and do it in a responsible way rather than try and slow it down too much. So AI is definitely inevitable. I hope both. I first see it being an inevitability, almost something that everyone must do. To do it strategically, I really think you need to, in a similar way to putting things down in words, in job descriptions, and in processes. If we're going to do AI strategically, I would like to see more strategic um, positions and roles in enterprise companies, which are specifically focused on that. So at the moment, it's almost like everybody should be doing AI. I I would love to see the day where we start having our chief AI officers at
Hmm.
the LT board. To me, that would show a strategic shift in how a company thinks about AI. Until that happens, I think AI is not being taken as strategically as it should. And I think that in the next couple of years, we'll start seeing in FTSE 100 enterprise companies a couple of these appointments of it's not data, it's not IT, it's something different. It touches everybody, and it's not just technical. AI is not just about the tech, which is why I think putting it purely underneath, let's say, the CTO could not give the most optimal outputs, because by doing that, you say, well, AI is a tech thing. And to me, AI is not just about tech. It's got a very strong human part to it, a very strong philosophical part to it. When you're talking to an AI or prompting an AI, that's not tech anymore. That's a person talking to an interface, which has to, well, it acts like a human. And
Yeah.
so I think when we start seeing more appointments at the strategic level, to me, that will flag that enterprise companies will be taking a more strategic approach to AI. At the moment, I'm seeing it more pushed into the functions on an operational basis.
Sure. Thank you. Just a quick point of clarification. You referred to the LT board. What's LT?
That's the leadership team.
Oh,
So
okay.
the board under the CEO. So
I,
your CFO, CIO, CTO.
I'm with you. That's great. I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood the term LT. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Um, so, what do you think are some of the major barriers then? What's stopping organizations from adopting AI in your experience?
I think AI is being adopted, which is great. Things which might slow down AI adoption, it might be enterprise companies being too punitive on employees, stopping them from doing too many things and slowing them down too much. The problem with stopping someone from doing something is that it can reduce the risk in one area, but it can create the risk up in a completely different area. For example, you could block ChatGPT on all of your systems.
Hmm.
Problem is, ChatGPT is in everyone's pocket now. Everyone on the planet who has a phone
Yeah.
has ChatGPT. So if somebody really wants to use AI and they think it's necessary, they'll do it. And they'll do it in a different place, which you're no longer monitoring. So I think companies need to be very careful not to stop people from using AI, And if they want to stop people from using a certain type of AI, they absolutely need to give them a different facility or a different place where they can do so in perhaps a more controlled environment for that enterprise company. And that's great because actually, if a company can give their employees a safe space to experiment with AI, that's the opposite. So instead of sending them into a place of higher risk by saying you can't do it, they go off onto other systems. You give them all of the same capability and you do it in a safe environment. They will probably feel a lot happier experimenting in those environments. And the second thing is just education. This is the point that I made to Parliament, is that AI is changing so much so fast. We can't just have a once a year training on AI because every year the amount of change is so huge. So we need to make sure that the training and the understanding is at a high level.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, people still don't truly understand what AI could do. So lots of use cases, lots of hero stories are also really, really good to start the imagination, because I think lots of the innovation with AI won't happen really high up the chain. It will happen lower down where people are actually solving the problems, actually dealing with these issues. Those are the ones who will really come with your innovation, your new ideas. But they first need to be kind of explained what AI is and what it can do in order for them to be able to come up with ideas. And then the companies have to extract those ideas. So they have to give people a platform to put their hand up and say, this is how I think AI could help my function, or this is how AI could help my job. And along with that is making sure that there is not this fear of AI. Like, AI is coming, yes, and we've got two options. We either bury our heads in the ground or we learn how to utilize it to become better. And so I think everyone's worried about AI taking their jobs. So companies need to be also aware of that and give assurances to their employees that the people who are coming forward with ideas about how AI can help their departments, that's a good thing. And that actually puts you ahead of everyone else in the game. And
Yeah.
incentivizing that push towards AI will be very important if you want to get the best ideas from your people.
And I guess you talked about experimentation, and actually, one way of kind of bringing up new ideas is by giving people an opportunity to kind of have a play and to think creatively. Just to get your thoughts on experimentation, I mean, have you seen examples and kind of good practices of how organizations have encouraged and brought this level of experimentation into the organization?
Yes, I think being proactive with experimentation and giving people a platform is
Hmm.
really great. Um, Ideally, you incentivize it, because the problem with experimentation is that everybody's got a day job,
Yeah.
and most often, if you don't perform your job, you will get punished. But if you don't do experimentation R&D, you won't really get punished.
Yes.
And a lot of the time, you won't get anything if you win. And so people need to be given also that environment and that incentivization to be able to do experimentation. Otherwise, they just won't do it, or you'll see a really reduced engagement from people. I haven't got time. I've got to do my job. So the companies where I've seen that being done better is where people are given that time, given that platform, saying, you will not be punished. If this takes a little bit longer, either you won't be punished, or here's an incentivization for coming with your ideas. Those ideas, and it's very important because those ideas have to come from within the business. You can get external agencies who will come along and you can do experimentation with them, and that's also a good idea, because what you'll get then is all of the best ideas from different companies outside you. It's also very important to look internally. If you believe in your people and you believe that they've got something great to give back, and I hope all enterprise companies do, giving them a platform, giving them incentivization is really the way to do it. And I think the companies that are doing that will get more innovation And it will be a different kind of innovation. It will be a very homegrown innovation. It'll be a very company proud innovation, as opposed to, say, we've brought in some consultants and they've done the innovation for us.
Yeah. And on that very note, um, you know, how would you or what would you say to a board of directors who are thinking of deploying AI strategically? What what would you say should be the top three, five, seven items on their agenda to ensure that AI is deployed strategically?
Wow. So I understand there's lots of complexities on a board. So if I was to focus just on I would probably bucket up a lot of what we've already said today. The first one would be a clear message that AI is inevitable and change is scary, but we need to manage that. And it's not just the board that will be scared of that. It's going to be everyone in their company. Um, it reminds me of when we first introduced cars into the UK or the world, and everyone was scared because suddenly you could go a lot faster than before. Nobody really knew what that meant. Instead of hurting maybe one or two people on a horse, you could now hurt 10, 20, 30 people. They even used to have somebody walking in front of the car, waving a red flag, the
Yes.
first cars that were invented. And with time, we've forgotten that because that fear has gone, because now we've understood cars are okay, we've managed the risks effectively. So AI is coming, it's inevitable. There will be a certain level of fear, and I would say that needs to be managed within the organization. People need to understand that we are not on a conquest to remove everybody from their jobs. We are here to do much more complex and interesting things with AI and have that actually communicated out to everybody. Data quality and investment in master data is really essential. I would say definitely increase investment there. Um, and specifically with the goal of connecting different data sources from different functions for AI. So I would say increase the investment, and the focus is this is for AI. And then the training piece, make sure that everybody is trained, make sure everyone's given a safe environment to use AI, and don't be too restrictive if you don't have a viable alternative for your people. Otherwise, they will, it's human nature. If you have an enterprise of tens of thousands of people, a certain percentage will find a different way to do that task, especially when especially in some job roles, using AI allows you to get 10x returns. It's very tempting for somebody to use AI even if they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, I would say definitely make sure that there is a safe space for people to operate in.
Great, thank you. And I know, Ben, from what you've said a bit earlier, but also in terms of our own interactions, that you do quite a bit of work with Parliament and policymakers. And I just wondered if you could reflect on what you think policymakers ought to be considering if they're going to adopt AI or at least encourage organizations to adopt AI faster.
I think organizations, especially the UK government, are doing very well with policy. We're seeing that good balance between safety and not slowing down, and that's really good.
Mm.
And they are listening to the experts. So I think a continuation of that balanced approach is very important. I think it's more of a person issue at the moment. So, for example, cybersecurity attacks, the biggest the biggest area or the biggest place where cyber criminals attack is via humans, via
Yeah.
phishing, via vishing, um, via getting control of a person's personal accounts in some cases. So I think there's going to be more of that. We've really got more of a culture problem at the moment. There's lots of negative sentiment. And so I think in terms of policies, I wouldn't recommend them to change a lot. I would just say listen to the experts, continue as they are, and really have a balanced approach. Enterprise companies, although policy will affect them, 99% of the outcomes, I would argue, are not related to the policy at all, but related to the decisions made at the enterprise level, decisions made by very important people like the board, the culture itself, how that is managed,
Mhm.
and how people are incentivized or decentivized to work with AI. I would say that 99% of the outcomes are based more on that than policy itself, which is why I think, although policy is important, actually advising enterprises and advising large organizations how they should approach AI more on a human level, for me, I think that's a bigger fish to fry, and that's where I focus a lot of my attention, because I keep saying I do think AI isn't really a tech problem now. It's moved on. It's now a human problem. It's in everybody's, or a human opportunity. It's in everybody's pocket. So I would just urge them to focus more on the human side, because they've got the tech side sorted from what I can see.
Yeah, you've raised a very interesting question in my mind, which is, I guess, the balance, if not a trade-off between kind of government or external regulations, external policies versus an organization's own internal policies and internal guidelines. Uh, what are your thoughts in terms of where that balance ought to be in terms of a company or an organization having some real clarity about its policies internally in relation to AI?
I think it's very important, especially in all aspects, but especially with AI, that everyone inside an organization is up to date with the policy, because it can, firstly, it can change so quickly, and secondly, the consequences of not following the rules properly could be very, very bad. So I think, as I said, internal policies, I think, have a much larger impact than external, and the culture is very important. So,
Hmm.
for example, you might have an ISO standard which is applied to your company. It's like ISO 27001
Yeah.
for IT, and
Hmm.
there's a big difference between ticking the boxes to ensure that you're fulfilling the obligations of that external policy, and really having the culture where that policy is inside everybody's daily decision making. And those are two really big things. And I think with AI, if we could tick boxes all day, but if it's not adopted into the culture itself, you won't see the impact on the business. And so I think that's why internal policies are much more important than external policies, or at least they're both important, but you need to make sure that you're not just ticking the boxes, and your internal policies reflect a true desire for AI and managing AI responsibly, not just ticking some external policy boxes.
Yeah. And you're right. That really does come down to the culture of the organization and its leadership. And it strikes me from what you've been saying that one of the issues around, you know, AI is not just a technical issue. It is a people, it is a leadership, it is a culture issue, I think is a very powerful message that I'm hoping listeners will take away from this episode. Ben, let me say thank you so very much for giving me your time, giving our listeners this time to share your thoughts, share your ideas. I know you and Uptitude are doing a huge amount of work with enterprise organizations. And yes, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure having you on the AI Adoption Podcast.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
All the very best.